The lock is actually the crown jewel of Plaquemine. The lock was a big part of our childhood because this was the center. This was the thing that happened in Plaquemine because there were always boats coming through. And when we would be at school, we would come up here to see the boats passing, and it was always an interesting place to us.
Plaquemine is a small town located about 13 miles from Baton Rouge. The locks were opened in 1909. They were under construction 14 years. So in 1895, construction started. Plaquemine Locks is an establishment by the U.S. Corps of Engineers to facilitate water traffic between the Mississippi River and Bayou Plaquemine.
Explain how that works.
The locks worked off gravity flow with two sets of gates, one set of gates on the east side and one set of gates on the west side. So if a boat wanted to enter, the locks got ready to let the boat enter from the Mississippi River by allowing water to flow from the Mississippi River into the lock chamber until both levels were equal. And once both levels were equal, the locks would open the gates to allow the boat and barges to enter. Once they entered, the gates were closed and the valves on the west side would open and allow the water to drain out of the lock chamber into Bayou Plaquemine to that same level. Once that level was achieved, the gates would open on Bayou Plaquemine's side and the boat was allowed to exit. This building is the lock house building located on Plaquemine Locks. This building here is responsible for all the machinery that would operate the gates. Two guys, one on the other side of the lock chamber and one on this side of the lock chamber, had to go out to get the hydraulic water pressure to open gates. And these gates were made out of steel and iron, and they were all riveted. The hydraulic water pressure was created by pumps here in the lock house. The actual pumps were located right here on these concrete foundations, and we have a pictorial of the pumps, steam-powered water pumps, and they were quite heavy. And we had two, one on the side that you're looking at now, and one on this side over here. And they were identical, and only one pump was needed at a time. The other one stood on standby. About 1948, 49, all the steam equipment was removed, and these two 40 horsepower electric motors were installed here, coupled to these centrifugal pumps. And these pumps put out the same pressure, approximately 500 psi. All you have to do is push a button to start the motor, and the motor would turn the pump, and the pump created the water pressure, the hydraulic water pressure, to operate the gates and also the large intake valves on both ends of the lock chamber. And we are looking at the west side of the lock house, and the two circular windows at the bottom were the locations of the boilers in the early days when the locks was run by steam. So these boilers provided steam for the pumps located in the lock house. And now we're looking at the lock chamber, and we can see that there are many hitches located in the wall, and that's where the workers on the barges and the tugboats would tie their ropes to. We're also looking at the gates that were located on both ends of the lock chamber. Two sets of gates were located, and people ask, why two sets of gates? So if we had a malfunction in one set of gates, we could use the other set. Also, if we had small boats coming in, we would use the internal set of gates, and that decreases the amount of water we had to put in the lock chamber. And located way down at the bottom is a set of gates, very short gates, and they were not operated by hydraulic water pressure. We had to use what they call chain hoists or some kind of mechanism to pull the gates closed. And the only way they were used is when they dewatered the locks. And why did they dewater the locks? To repair the sills down at the bottom.
How large is this structure?
This structure is 547 feet long, 55 feet wide, and 50 feet deep. Actually, the total lift would have been about 30 feet, which was the largest lift in the country when it was built. This site was closed in 1961 after a new lock system was built in Port Allen, which is about 10 miles from Plaquemine. The reason why is barges and tugboats were being built larger to handle larger commodities. To handle that, they built a larger set of locks. And also the entrance to the locks from the intercoastal waterway system is a straight body of water, where here in Bayou Plaquemine, we have a curve that's underneath two bridges. And so boats had a difficult time making that turn and getting into the lock chamber. It was undecided what was going to become of Plaquemine Locks here, because it was not yet a historical site. It was just sitting up here and closed up. Louisiana wanted to run a highway system through here, and our local editor, Gary Hebert, thought that we should preserve this site.
My husband, Gary Hebert, was the founding editor of the Plaquemine Post newspaper. The engineers for the Louisiana Department of Highways decided that since the lock was closed, that they would tear it down and they would put 4 lanes across this area. But my husband loved the lock, so he fought them from the very beginning. In 1969, he wrote about it in his editorials that it was the worst thing that could happen to Plaquemine. But the highway department had the power. We didn't have much, and they went ahead and they made plans to destroy the lock. In the meantime, Gary enlisted the help of the Louisiana Office of Tourism. With their help, he prepared papers to have the lock put on the National Register of Historic Places. This took place in the early 70s. So once it was placed on the National Register, it could not be torn down. Of course, people were angry with us because they wanted traffic moving. They didn't like waiting in traffic. So we became very unpopular in our own town. And as time went on, you know, advertisers dropped their advertising. It got pretty bad. My children were taunted at school, and we were like outcasts for a little while. But as time passed, people realized the value of the Plaquemine Lock and what it meant to this community, the most historic place in our community. And by this time, people realized that he was so right. He was so right in saving this place, because it would be so sad if we had a highway right here, right now.